imported them to America. And we are still suffering from that plague. Ambrose Bierce hit the mark squarely when he defined a Puritan as a person who succumbs to the temptation to deny himself pleasure. So the average American still views the working painter as a very suspect person, probably a self-indulgent dreamer, somebody who refuses to provide a useful product or service, and is, in any case, clearly un-American, at least until he is safely dead, and it turns out that his life work has a certain market value after all. In the late 60s, I was a millionaire for nearly 3 years. Unfortunately, during a divorce, I mislaid $1 million in control of my fine company. Looking back, I realized that money did not fulfill me or make me happy beyond merely making me rich. Sometimes that was pretty good too. Despite the recovery of my poverty, I'm a far happier man today. I have discovered that if you can manage to make and lose $1 million before you are 46 years old, you are forever free from that over-concern with money, that American sickness. I am not certain, though, that I did not overpay for that vaccination. Let me say right off that this used to be the first one, but it somehow became 22. Let me say right off, before the label of plagiarism is leveled at me, that I have examined my life, and I do not believe that I have ever experienced a single original thought. There is always the accident of unearned appreciation. And there is always the accident of earned but unlikely appreciation. So you had better not include them in your calculations of reasonable expectation. Because in this direction lies not only certain bitterness, but great misdirected anger as well. As I said on another page, the hope of recognition and success is innocent enough, but must not be piled the simple truth that to become a dedicated painter is essentially a vow of poverty, real or relative. Some of these, I wrote most of this stuff about 25 years ago. Some of them I no longer believe. You must take care to keep your goals safely beyond your grasp, because otherwise you risk succeeding. And if you succeed, the struggle is over. Or arriving, if you arrive, the journey is over. Or finding, if you find, the search is over. Longfellow said, but your reach must exceed your grasp, or what's a heaven for? It took me 20 years to understand it, but the journey is the goal. I used to read that, spoken by great men, great painters, philosophers. They always talking about the journey is the goal. It took me 20 years to understand that. It takes you 15, you're way ahead of me. The doubts, and then there are the doubts. If the sun or moon should shout, they'd immediately go out. William Blake. Doubt one. Am I lying to myself again? Doubt two. Why does painting only get harder? Doubt three. How come I can't do what I used to be able to do easily? A sampler of the myriad doubts that from time to time cripple, sometimes paralyze every working painter. and every creative person I've ever known. My big brother always said, "Don't worry, Bob. As soon as they put us in a box, the doubts go away." Answer one. True enough, and if you have the courage to ask if you are lying to yourself again, you probably are not. Or at least you're on the edge of facing it. Answer two. Fading does definitely get harder, but only because you are digging deeper and seeing farther. Answer three. You can't do what you used to do easily because you won't settle for easy anymore. You simply demand more of yourself. So the doubts are an indication that we are alive and that we are probably growing. Question, wonderful, but will I remember that? Answer, no, of course not. No matter, you'll muster through anyway because nothing else is worth the trouble. That's what it keeps coming down to. If something else is worth the trouble, Jesus, don't become a painter. You should only become a painter if nothing else is worth the trouble. Mediocrity, another grim fear of every student. To leave well enough alone is the certain way to become and stay mediocre. I say this only in reference to your work, the principal thing you do in life. To be a mediocre painter is a far worse thing than to be a bad painter. A bad painter, if he is honest and persistent, sooner or later will recognize his lack of knowledge or skill and proceed to struggle and acquire, understand, and grow. As the bad painter begins to grow, he develops a faith, consciously or not, that he is not a bad painter per se, simply that he is not a fine painter yet. Who can deny that every fine painter was a bad painter once? The essential flaw in the mediocre person is that he has insufficiently high ideals. This misfortune eliminates any possibility of excellence. Before I go on with this, anybody who's ever been in business knows that competition promotes growth. But so often that growth is downwards, depending on how greedy they are, depending how little integrity they have. But only working out of idealism promotes healthy growth upward. Always. After all, the essential flaw in the mediocre person is that he has insufficiently high ideals. This misfortune eliminates the possibility of excellence. After all, whoever bothered to grow artistically or intellectually with its accompanying pain, doubt, and sustained effort, if he believes with secret conviction that he already knows everything he wants or needs to know. Sadly, mediocre painters are often intelligent, educated, and well-trained, but these qualities add up to not very much without a high quotient of idealism which alone tends to stimulate healthy growth. Periodically, remember and reflect on the happy fact that those wonderful paintings we see in museums and art books were not made by saints or supermen, but by men and women very like us, as Robert Henry said. Who learned what was worth doing and learned how to do it and did it, success or no success. How many people are here are acquainted with Henry's wonderful book? Yeah. Every young painter should have that book on his table. High ideals and a slightly impossible goal are to the painter as the North Star is to the sailor. knows whether or not he is going in the right direction. An uncomfortable truth you slowly learn to live with is that you never hit what you aim at on any level beyond the ordinary. Still, the difference between what you have and what you aimed at might merely be just that, a difference, yes, but not necessarily downward. The possibilities of self-delusion here are enormous, as I'm sure you will have noticed. No matter, it is your duty to ponder and then decide anyway. Don't be too quick to condemn your effort or to declare yourself the master either. Max Weber, this is a brand new quote. I just found it in the New York Times book review section. You know, they have sometimes the most wonderful, informative essays. An awful lot of these things I first encountered in the New York Times book section in this marvelous essay. Max Weber, the German writer, said in an essay of 1918, "What is possible would never have been achieved if, in this world, people had not repeatedly reached for the impossible." Isn't that wonderful? On copying, it is the miracle of painting that the knowledge, the conviction, the sensibility, in short, the genius of the greatest painters somehow translates itself into the craft of paint, applied with a brush on the panel or canvas. Through good quality reproductions, we can examine, study, analyze, and emulate that incomparable craft. And as honest seeking students, that is what I unreservedly advise you to do. In this way, you can, if you choose, actually apprentice yourself to whatever master you want to learn from. On art history. We ought to stop. One more. On art history. Complete originality in art is an impossibility because you cannot live long enough to reinvent the art and craft of painting. You do, though, have the option either to choose your influences, informing your personal art, or to remain ignorant of the influences that will, in any case, form your art. Can anyone believe that ignorance is the better choice? This, then, is why a working knowledge of the history of art is as important as knowing how to see in mixed color. Should we stop now?
No.
I want to have a question and answer session. After a degree of professional competence is arrived at in the craft of painting, the chief concern becomes and remains for the rest of your life, what is worth painting? Because that choice is rooted in the painter's training, background, and personality, compounded by his life experience. Each painter finds his own direction, but not quickly and not easily. It's really not true to say that each painter finds it. Only the dedicated have a chance. Oh, thank you. Oh, that was so good. On pricing, this is very important. You must never allow your self-esteem to become involved or identified with your prices. Keep your pride and ego entirely concerned with your work itself. Otherwise, a natural but unfortunate tendency to overprice your efforts will close off any possibility of building an audience. Also, you will actually punish the few loyal friends who desire to help you. Not a good idea. Gee, Bob, that's a marvelous painting. I'd love to live with that. How much is it? $8,000. So it's that big. That's a way to, you'll never get off the ground. You know, so many young students have a father or an uncle who has made a very good economic success in his life. And they always say to these kids, believing kids, remember, set your prices high that they justify what you're doing. That's a goddamn lie. That's such bad advice, the worst possible advice. Nobody ever got off the ground unless he was a bargain. It is true that by the time you are proficient enough to have a show in a good gallery, you have invested about the same time and effort as a trained surgeon or design engineer, with the single difference that our society needs its surgeons and engineers. It does not, though, have even a suspicion that it needs our paintings. One of the things I want most is an audience for my painting. The thing I want least is a complete collection of Kulicks. Because I have always made a living as a designer craftsman or a manufacturer or a teacher, I considered my painting simply too important to complicate with money. Painting is what I do with my life. The other endeavors are what I did to support my family and finance my painting. It is remarkable what you can do in our profit-oriented society if you can ignore the profit motive. Of course, most of your family, friends, and acquaintances will think you are a fool, but this only bothers you for the first 65 years or so. Dr. Samuel Johnson said, "The young writer for whom fame and riches are important to his happiness will have a desperate and unhappy life." Joshua Reynolds said in a famous lecture to students, "You must be as careful whom you choose to please as you are whom you choose to emulate. The lowest, most banal message will, of course, have the largest audience." George Moore, the 19th century poet and critic, said, "The function of the critic is to explain beauty to people who, without that explanation, might not see that beauty." Moore's definition is positive and enlightened, the finest I have ever heard. Working painters, though, see art critics from a slightly different orientation. My old pal, the painter Herb Katzman, spoke for all of us when he said, "A good critic is a guy who likes my work. A great critic is a guy who loves my work." We were getting drunk with that. On career. If a painter is active in the art center of the world for 20 years and works, he will sooner or later have gallery representation, be in group shows, one-man shows, museum shows in New York City and out. He will eventually sell, get reviews, awards, articles, and other honors. All this will befall him simply because he is on the scene and it got to be his turn. I have had all these things and have been both gratified and deluded by each. And although I suspected at 30, I didn't fully realize until I was 50 that nothing is important except the painting I'm doing now. Okay, let's have questions.
Do you still teach?
Yeah, I'm a compulsive teacher. We went and had a hamburger. I try to teach you how to eat it. Any other questions? I'm sorry, I can't see the hand. Should we put the lights on?
Bob,
Yeah.
as you have developed as a painter, have you added to your pantheon of heroes? Have they changed? Have they stayed the same?
Yeah.
Which?
I'm constantly discovering more, but, you know, as painters, we get to choose our own family. Verandi is my father. The late Lemane flower paintings, he was my favorite uncle. My grandfather was Chardin, and my great-grandfather Vermeer. And anybody who ever painted a gold background saint in the Middle Ages is a close family friend. That's my family. And I've been intensely loyal to them. Any other? Yeah.
Do you have a favorite pigments that you use?
No. I don't think painters have favorite pigments, do they? It never occurred to me. Well, yeah, at the moment I love olive green. Did you all get a slide? I mean, one of my olives? I hope I brought it up. I don't know. Huh? Oh, yeah. Oh, this heroes. There's a painting that belonged to Kathy, David's wife. I gave it to her during a public painting ago. We were making jewelry.
Jewelry and dinner.
Yeah. This painting has really changed my life. My version of this is my olive paintings. This is such a great masterpiece. This is a nice painting. Yeah, good.
Once we get out of school, we're not going to have this lovely support.
True.
What happens next?
Well, you have to find a self-employment device. That's some teaching, some sales, and some part-time job. It's very important that you don't become world-class in your self-employment device. That happened to me. I still hear people say, get back to me. Hey, you know, feel like the rich rainmaker is trying to be a painter.
But you, that's not an object, it's still a object. Comment about that?
Oh, yeah. When I paint the surf, Verandi is always my answer, but when, yeah, Whistler becomes my master that day. Of course, that's the 17th century Spanish Italian. Famous Zerber, yeah.
Do you paint on cotton
I don't paint on stretch split and ether. I'm too sloppy for that. Too careless. I work on the panel, and sometimes I just it. Sometimes I will give a coat of shellac, which is a very safe thing to do. Shellac is dangerous. It's flexible, so as a wood panel, it's as hard on the sides for oak.
Well, we did discuss the amazing that we did in that conversation.
Squint a little and see. It looks. I used to title it "Don't." The way Devo said, "Don't." Your title should be "Don't try to spend this dollar." When I was teaching with Wade at the University of California, Davis, I was a guest painter like that semester, and I was trying to think what will really teach the kids the discipline of painting, the necessity to become an adequate craftsman, and to work with the highest possible ideals. study of the Machiavelli school, the Machiavelli school. Morandi, the Machiavelli school had a great, great painter named Giovanni Vittori. He was the most influential painter of that whole school, who lived longest. It helps to live longest. But Morandi was a student of his, and had always been an inspiration to him. And Morandi, of course, is my master.
I don't know which way we're going, Bob, or we need to get it stuck.
Oh,
I've got the,
yeah, go ahead, go.
there we
Oh,
go.
that's enough. That's the photograph is overexposed anyway. But, as you see, I'm Kulicke, the frame maker, his only customer is Kulicke, the painter. Just the way I enjoy it. But still, it's overexposed. And of course, the lights are on. Yeah.
Could you talk about your choices of framing for this particular painting?
There's a thing called eclectic framing. Eclectic in the sense that